Snark Squad. Babes, it's Wednesday, and you already know what that means. We are here for you, the gals, the guys, the gays, the bays, babes, literally everyone. We love you.
Let's address something right off the bat, okay, for anyone watching the video feed. Yes, we each have our own bottle of wine.
Fully committed.
And babes, we do not care. No shame. Cheers.
Cheers to that, because honestly, we need to talk, because it's almost summer.
Thank God.
Right, and that is exciting. The days are getting longer, the seasonal depression is theoretically lifting. But can we talk about allergies for a minute?
Oh boy, here we go.
Because, babes, I am struggling. I am literally struggling to exist.
You have been in what I can only describe as like a sustained immunological tailspin. I watched you walk in here today, and your eyes look like they were actively trying to escape your skull.
I am spiraling. I am physically and emotionally overwhelmed. It is an unpredictable, hostile environment out there.
It really is.
You walk outside, and the air is just visibly thick with biological material.
Huh.
Pollen is coating my car like a yellow snowstorm.
It's everywhere.
It is coating my lungs. And the absolute worst part is, the survival tactics I have to employ just to look socially acceptable.
Right, the makeup routine.
I spend an hour on a meticulously crafted, color-corrected makeup routine, right?
Huh?
And the second I step onto the pavement, my histamine receptors act like overzealous bouncers at a nightclub, just rejecting every particle of air.
Entry for the pollen.
Exactly. One single aggressive sneeze, and my mascara is suddenly halfway down my face. I look unhinged.
It is the sheer, unadulterated disrespect of nature. You try to participate in the changing of the seasons, and the flora just mounts a violent, unprovoked attack on your respiratory system.
A violent attack.
And it is never just a mild inconvenience for you. It is a full-body event. I saw you yesterday, desperately clutching a family-sized box of tissues, navigating that coffee shop sounding like a vintage steam engine.
Stop. I know I sounded terrible.
It completely derails your executive function.
Yeah, it really does. And I have tried everything. I'm consuming locally sourced honey by the gallon. I have air purifiers running in every room of my apartment like I am operating a clean room facility for microchip manufacturing.
Nothing works.
Nothing is working. The chaos is infiltrating every aspect of my life. But speaking of allergies causing absolute household chaos, story time.
Oh no, I'm bracing myself.
This is chaos. One of us has twin nieces, they're 4. And they just got an allergy test.
A completely standard routine medical diagnostic, just a little prick test on the back to identify antigens.
Exactly, a basic pediatric procedure. But babes, they're now pretending to be allergic to everything.
You have to respect the sheer manipulative genius of toddlers.
It's terrifying.
They have observed a medical phenomenon and instantly weaponized it for their own gain. They have discovered the ultimate indisputable loophole in parental authority.
I am dying laughing just visualizing it. It is an absolute hostage situation in that house right now. Last night, their mother puts a completely standard portion of steamed broccoli on their plates.
Well,
and what happens?
Let me guess. Instant anaphylaxis.
Yes. One of them dramatically clutches her tiny chest, collapses backward into her high chair, and gasps, "I can't breathe. The green trees make my throat scratchy."
The green trees.
And then she proceeded to execute a fake theatrical cough for 10 unbroken minutes.
It is a brilliant display of psychological warfare, because you cannot easily argue with an alleged immune response.
Right. What do you do?
What is a parent supposed to do? Call the bluff of a 4-year-old and demand they push through a fabricated anaphylactic shock. And I imagine the strategy is not just confined to the dinner table.
Oh, it is rapidly escalating. It is infiltrating the entire daily schedule. Bedtime. Suddenly, the act of putting on cotton pajamas induces a severe, invisible rash.
Tragic. Truly tragic.
One of them looked her father dead in the eye and said, "The blanket gives me the sniffles. I need to stay awake and watch cartoons to cure my health."
To cure my health. That is iconic.
They literally claimed they were allergic to the physical act of cleaning up their own toy box. "The Legos make my hands swell." The parents are just walking around completely defeated.
It is the perfect defense mechanism. They understand that invoking an allergy instantly triggers a risk-averse response from the adults. They have hacked the system.
It's terrifying and hilarious, but let's be honest. Speaking of things we are currently manifesting an extreme full-body rejection of, we are off the dating apps again.
Again, the great cyclical purge continues.
For the 100th time. Because, babes, it is absolutely chaotic. I am emotionally done. I have reached the absolute limit of my psychological endurance.
Let's dissect the pattern, because it is a fascinating, if depressing, behavioral loop.
Please do.
You experience a moment of vulnerability or boredom. You download the app, engaging in the gamification of human connection. You reduce complex, multidimensional individuals to a two-dimensional matrix of heavily curated photos and mildly witty prompts.
Yep, the prompts that are always about, liking The Office.
Exactly. You match. The initial text exchange implies functional literacy, and then you transition to the physical realm, and reality violently reasserts itself.
Violently. The reality is always a disaster. The guy from last weekend is the perfect case study. We agree to meet for coffee.
Nice.
Low stakes, introductory interaction.
Very low stakes.
He shows up 45 minutes late, offers zero explanation or apology, and then spends the entirety of the date delivering an unprompted, hyper-aggressive monologue about his cryptocurrency investments.
Oh, the crypto bros, the absolute worst demographic.
He did not ask me a single question about my life. And when the check arrived for 2 iced lattes, he literally opened the calculator app on his phone to divide a $14 bill down to the exact decimal point.
No. Please tell me you made that up.
I wish I did. I wanted to dissolve into the floorboards.
It is an exhausting exercise in energy depletion. Modern digital dating forces you to operate in a constant state of hypervigilance, scanning for red flags, analyzing microexpressions, and just hoping the person sitting across from you possesses basic empathy.
Which they usually don't.
It is no wonder you are experiencing profound burnout.
Real talk. Maybe we were just meant to watch love unfold on our TVs and not actually live it.
It is a highly rational, self-protective strategy. I fully support this.
Right. The environment is controlled, the narrative arcs are guaranteed, and you do not have to split the cost of an overpriced latte with a stranger who lacks self-awareness.
Exactly. I'll drink to that.
I just want to experience the dopamine hit of romance, the butterflies, the genuine connection, without subjecting myself to the psychological warfare of the apps. And that brings us perfectly to the actual, reason we're sitting here with wine today.
Exactly. Because this specific show, it hit different this week. It genuinely did.
It hit so hard. We have our wine, we have our notes, we have been endlessly analyzing the unedited footage and just scouring through the Reddit threads all week. It is time to get into it. Let's start with the absolute purest soul to ever grace our television screens. The man of the hour, Dylan.
Oh, Dylan. If we are contrasting your extreme dating app burnout with an example of pure, unjaded optimism, Dylan is the ultimate palate cleanser.
I am emotionally swooning over him.
Yeah.
Dylan is 22 years old. He is an immigrant from Guatemala, and he approaches the concept of dating with this raw, untainted enthusiasm.
It really does.
He has never been on a date before, but he is just brimming with this immense capacity for love.
What immediately stood out to me was his self-perception and how he chooses to present his identity. He introduces himself to the camera, and he very casually, almost proudly, drops the label that he is a street guy.
Yeah.
A gangster.
Yes.
Someone who operates with a tough exterior.
Right. And then, in the exact same breath, he completely contradicts that tough persona by explaining that his absolute favorite activity in the world is getting situated in his specific designated spot on his reclining chair, wrapping up in a blanket and just chilling out to watch his TV shows.
Which is an incredibly relatable duality. I, too, consider myself a hardened, cynical observer of the world who strictly requires being horizontal in my designated lounging zone by 8 p.m. to watch historical documentaries. He contains multitudes.
He is all of us.
But we have to analyze his preparation for this date, because it is a fascinating case study in social modeling. How does Dylan, a neurodivergent young man with zero practical romantic experience, prepare to court a woman? By studying the television show Love Island.
Wait, let me push back on this, because when I heard that, I almost dropped my wine glass.
It sounds alarming on paper.
Using Love Island as a blueprint for healthy romantic interaction is like using The Real Housewives as a blueprint for conflict resolution. It is absolute madness. Love Island is an incubator for toxic manipulation, gaslighting, and manufactured drama. You do not look to a villa full of aspiring influencers to learn how to treat a woman with respect.
On the surface, I completely agree with your horror. It is a terrifying educational curriculum, but this is where Dylan's analytical brilliance actually shines through.
Okay, lay it on me.
He is operating with a highly efficient behavioral algorithmic filter. When asked what specific lessons he extracted from hundreds of hours of that chaotic programming, he didn't absorb the screaming matches, the deceit, or the toxic culture of pulling people for chats behind their backs.
Right.
He filtered out 99.9% of the behavioral garbage and extracted one pure golden directive: treating girls nicely. That is his entire takeaway. He managed to observe an environment defined by dysfunction and independently isolate the only variable that actually matters.
It is brilliant when you frame it like that. He bypassed all the superficial noise. But before we even analyze the date itself, we absolutely must address the broader context of Dylan's life. Specifically, his mother.
We have to.
Because this is where the socioeconomic reality of the show hits incredibly hard. I was sobbing on my couch watching them interact. The internet discourse, especially on Reddit this week, has been rallying behind her, and it is a crucial conversation.
We need to lay out the systemic architecture of their situation for anyone who might just be looking at the surface-level footage. We see Dylan and his mother living in a very compact one-bedroom apartment in California. And the detail that initially sparked some loud, profoundly ignorant voices online is the fact that Dylan's bed is located in his mother's bedroom.
Which made me fiercely angry. The sheer audacity of people sitting behind their keyboards, judging a family's living situation without an ounce of context or empathy.
It was a reactionary judgment devoid of sociological understanding. But thankfully, the community rapidly stepped in to provide the necessary reality checks regarding the financial logistics of neurodivergent care in the U.S.
Let's look at the variables. She is an immigrant. She is a single mother supporting an adult son on a single income. And they are living in California, a state with an astronomical cost of living and a severe housing crisis.
Precisely. She is sharing a room with her son because she is ensuring he has a safe, stable roof over his head. It is not some strange enmeshment. It is pure, unadulterated economic survival.
Exactly.
And when you look into the financial gymnastics required to navigate the American healthcare system, it is a nightmare. People online were highlighting the brutal reality of the benefits cliff. You work hard, you make slightly too much money to qualify for comprehensive aid, but you make nowhere near enough to afford the exorbitant out-of-pocket costs and co-pays of specialized care.
It represents a massive gaping hole in the social safety net. Specialized day programs or vocational training for adults on the autism spectrum are exceptionally rare. They're chronically underfunded, frequently operating over capacity, and prohibitively expensive.
And this mother is absorbing the impact of a systemic failure. She is fully bilingual, navigating complex bureaucratic systems in a second language, bearing in mind that resources and diagnostic frameworks for autism can be vastly different or less accessible in Central America, and she is managing all of this while working exhausting 12-plus-hour days.
And she does it all with this overwhelming, radiant love. There is a specific scene where she is helping Dylan get dressed and ready for his date. She's adjusting his collar, and the emotional weight of the moment just overtakes her.
I know exactly what scene you're talking about.
She begins to cry, and she switches from English to her native language because the complexity of what she is feeling requires the intimacy of her mother tongue. And she just articulates this profound desire for him to simply be happy, to experience the normal milestones of a 22-year-old, to go on a date, to feel love, to be seen.
It was a moment of absolute, unproduced emotional truth. It cuts through any artifice of reality television. It is a universal ache of a parent wanting a less frictionless path for their child.
That was a mess.
But transitioning from that heavy, beautiful context, let's look at how Dylan actually executes the date. Armed with his Love Island protocol, he meets Caroline.
Oh, yeah, the setting is fascinating. They go to this immersive, functioning Western town set, and Dylan arrives with a gift. He hands her a pink cowgirl hat.
Which is such a specific choice.
But by some absolute miracle of the universe, it flawlessly matches Caroline's entire aesthetic. She is wearing this vibrant all-pink outfit. She is fully in her lover era, and he absolutely nails the accessory coordination.
It functions as an excellent social icebreaker. It immediately establishes thoughtfulness. But the psychological mechanics of the location itself are what I found most interesting. The environment provides structural props. There are two specific badges available: a sheriff badge and a deputy badge.
Okay, yes, I love this part.
And instead of automatically assuming the dominant role, Dylan presents her with the choice. He asks, "Do you want to be sheriff or deputy?"
Yes. He completely diffuses any assumed power dynamic right from the start. And when she actively chooses to be the deputy, he embraces the role of the sheriff. It gives them both a playful, clearly defined structure to operate within.
Which is so smart.
When you are navigating the immense anxiety of a first date, Having a literal role to play provides an incredible psychological safety net.
It reduces the cognitive load of having to invent the interaction from scratch. And then we witness the physical activity portion of the date. They sit on this manual, rapidly spinning, slightly terrifying playground device, the ring around the rosy spinner.
It was such a perfect visual metaphor. They are sitting opposite each other on this metal wheel, maintaining this polite, getting-to-know-you conversation while simultaneously spinning faster and faster.
It looked nauseating, honestly.
The centrifugal force is building, they're getting visibly dizzy and a little scared, but they are laughing through it.
Yeah.
It is the exact physical manifestation of what falling in love feels like.
Yeah.
You were just holding onto the bars, trying to keep your focus on the person in front of you, while the entire world violently spins around you and you lose all sense of control.
Well, and it induces a shared state of mild physiological arousal, increased heart rate, adrenaline, which psychology tells us frequently gets misattributed to romantic attraction. It's the classic bridge experiment in action.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And Dylan, maintaining the pacing he learned from television, does not hesitate. The moment the spinning stops, he directly asks for her assessment. He asks if she likes him. She affirms. He asks if she would be open to a second date. She affirms. And then, crucially, he navigates the boundary of physical touch.
He offers options.
He does. A hug, a kiss on the hand, or a kiss on the cheek.
And Caroline beautifully asserts her own pacing boundary. She says, just a hug for now. And Dylan accepts it instantly, without a hint of disappointment or pressure. It was a masterclass in consent and respect.
It really was.
But then the day ends, and we see the immediate aftermath. Dylan returns home. He sits down with his mother and his cousin. The adrenaline begins to metabolize out of his system, and he just hits a massive neurological wall.
He experiences a profound sensory and emotional crash. He becomes overwhelmed to the point of tears. He articulates it very clearly, stating, "This is overwhelming. This is my first time doing this, but this was just a lot."
This is where I want to really unpack the psychology, because I relate to this specific feeling so intensely. Even neurotypical people experience this, but for someone on the spectrum, the amplification must be intense. You go on a date. You expend a massive amount of cognitive energy masking, which is the process of suppressing your natural impulses to perform expected social behaviors. You are modulating the pitch of your voice. You are manually calculating appropriate eye contact. You are hyper-analyzing the other person's body language.
It's a full-time job.
And when you finally close your front door, the performative software shuts down and your internal battery is completely decimated.
You are describing the precise mechanics of social depletion. Dylan was also likely experiencing the onset of limerence, that sudden, intense, involuntary cognitive obsession with a new romantic prospect. His brain is suddenly flooded with novel neurochemicals, combined with the sheer sensory exhaustion of the environment and the masking.
So his brain just overloaded.
It is akin to running a high-end, graphically intense video game on a laptop battery. Eventually, the system simply forces an emergency shutdown to prevent overheating. His tears were not tears of sadness. They were a physiological pressure release valve.
It was so deeply relatable and vulnerable to watch. It makes you realize how much invisible labor goes into a quote-unquote simple social interaction.
But speaking of environments that aggressively test a person's sensory threshold, we must pivot to Emma.
Oh, Emma.
Emma knows exactly who she is. She knows her boundaries, but she gets completely ambushed by Mother Nature.
Emma provides a fascinating study in self-actualization and the rigorous enforcement of personal standards. We observed her in a previous interaction turning down a man named Austin, and her reasoning was entirely sound.
Right.
She evaluated the dynamic, recognized an absence of genuine intellectual or emotional friction, and gracefully exited. She is living independently, she is pursuing higher education, she is a published author and a songwriter, she has constructed a fulfilling life, and she refuses to compromise that architecture for a subpar connection. I love that she is unabashedly picky. Women are so often conditioned to just be grateful for any attention, to lower their standards to accommodate a man's ego. But Emma explicitly states, "I have my life together. I require a partner who can match my energy and carry a substantive conversation."
Which is exactly what you should do.
So she agrees to a date with Eric. Eric is an actor, and crucially, they share a foundational religious background. They're both practicing Mormons, which immediately provides a shared vocabulary and set of values. And they decide to meet at a tulip garden. It sounds like a scene from a romance novel, right?
In theory, it is a highly curated, aesthetically pleasing environment designed to facilitate gentle conversation, but then the physical environment violently revolts against the concept of romance.
The windstorm. We're not talking about a gentle atmospheric breeze. We are talking about an apocalyptic, gale force, dust-choking meteorological event.
It was unreal.
Emma literally makes a polite, conversational remark about the lovely weather. And the universe responds by immediately cutting to a shot of a literal hurricane of topsoil blasting them in the face.
Now, I have to introduce a slightly cynical structural theory regarding reality television production here.
I love a conspiracy. Lay it out.
I watched that sequence multiple times. The sheer comedic timing of the wind gusts was almost too perfect. It forces one to wonder if the production crew, sensing a potential lull in the conversational energy, deployed industrial-grade fans just off camera. Was there a production assistant hiding behind a patch of tulips with a leaf blower aimed precisely at their faces to manufacture environmental adversity?
I would absolutely believe that. The dust was visibly accumulating in their teeth and their eyes. It was total chaos. But what is interesting is how environmental adversity acts as a pressure test for a date.
It strips away the pretense.
Exactly. They couldn't just rely on polite small talk. They had to bond over the shared survival of this absurd situation. They are aggressively feeding koi fish while fighting against the elements. And this is where Eric's specific coping mechanisms emerge. Because Eric is an actor, he defaults to doing vocal impressions.
This is a critical point of analysis regarding masking and defense mechanisms. When the conversational flow falters or when the environment introduces stress, Eric utilizes impressions as a vocal shield. It is a way of filling the auditory space without having to offer genuine, unscripted vulnerability.
But wait, let me challenge that. Is it a sophisticated defense mechanism, or is it just a fundamental lack of social calibration?
A fair question.
Because the impressions he chooses are highly questionable. Emma initiates by doing a very gentle, universally recognizable Mickey Mouse voice. It is charming. It is brief. Eric counters with a Donald Duck impression. Again, acceptable. It shows a willingness to play along.
Yeah.
But then he escalates. He brings out the Darth Vader.
And not just a passing quote. He commits to the heavy, mechanical, asthmatic breathing.
Yes, the sustained, heavy breathing. If you are on a first date, attempting to establish romantic chemistry in the middle of a dust storm, the absolute last thing you should introduce into the auditory environment is the labored, threatening respiration of a Sith Lord.
It is deeply unromantic.
It completely obliterates any potential sexual tension. It is too much auditory input.
I agree, the calibration was severely off. The Donald Duck implies a shared cultural nostalgia. The Darth Vader implies an impending medical emergency. Yet, and this is where the theory of shared frequency comes in, Emma actually responds positively to it. They manage to find a point of mutual resonance regarding SpongeBob SquarePants.
Which saved the day.
Despite the gale force winds and the questionable vocal choices, there is an underlying current of acceptance.
She gave him so much grace. You could tell she felt a baseline level of physical or energetic attraction that allowed her to smooth over the awkward, silent pauses. Because at the conclusion of this chaotic, dusty encounter, Eric formally asks for a second date, and she doesn't hesitate. She says yes.
It demonstrates that a successful date does not require flawless execution. It merely requires a mutual willingness to endure the awkwardness together.
So true.
But moving from the fragile beginnings of a first date, we must transition to a couple navigating the complex architecture of a long-term commitment. Madison and Tyler. They are crossing significant logistical milestones.
They are actively merging their ecosystems. Madison has relocated geographically to be closer to Tyler, establishing a new apartment with her brother, and they have reached the ultimate crucible of any serious relationship, the integration of the parental units. Both sets of parents come together for a shared dinner.
The sociology of the dinner table is fascinating. You are observing the collision of two distinct family cultures, and what is immediately apparent is the profound level of support emanating from Tyler's parents.
They are so sweet.
They do not treat Madison with the cautious distance usually reserved for a son's new girlfriend. They actively envelop her into their familial structure. However, the true narrative centerpiece of this dinner is the revelation provided by Madison's father.
It is the pinnacle of reality television storytelling. Madison's dad is expressing his natural parental anxieties about Madison living more independently, specifically regarding her financial management. And he casually, over dinner, exposes the fact that Madison has severe OCD, which manifests as a massive hyperfixated spending compulsion.
Yes.
And the target of this compulsion, the local dollar store. specifically the purchasing of dolls.
We need to analyze this deeply because it is not merely a quirky anecdote. It is a profound look at neurobiology and dopamine-seeking behavior. We are not talking about occasionally buying a cheap item. We are talking about a compulsion so severe that she would systematically sneak out of her educational environment, cross the street, and drain her available financial resources on low-value trinkets to satisfy an internal neurological itch.
It's an addiction.
The behavior became so detrimental to her autonomy that her father had to stage a highly unconventional intervention.
And the execution of that intervention is what set me spiraling. How does a father stop his adult daughter from bankrupting herself at a discount retailer?
Yeah.
He literally prints out a photograph of Madison's face. He physically walks into the dollar store, approaches the cashiers, and presents the photo like an Old West wanted poster.
He 86'd his own daughter.
He explicitly instructs the staff, do not process transactions for this individual, cut off her supply. He initiated a localized municipal ban on his own daughter.
The psychological dynamics at play here are staggering. It is the externalization of executive function. Because Madison's internal impulse control was overridden by her OCD, by the desperate need for the brief dopamine spike that comes with the purchase, her father had to create an external physical barrier to prevent the behavior.
Right.
The sheer social humiliation of being formally banned from a Dollar Tree is unparalleled, but it functioned as a necessary circuit breaker for her compulsion.
I relate to the underlying emotion of this so aggressively it makes me sweat. Obviously, the specifics are different. But who among us has not fallen prey to a hyperfixation spending spiral as a coping mechanism?
Oh, we all have.
When you feel emotionally adrift or overwhelmed by the chaos of life, you seek control through commerce. You convince yourself that acquiring a specific object will permanently regulate your nervous system. I fully admit, there are days when I require a wanted poster of my face to be legally enforced at the entrance of Sephora.
Or Target.
Or Target. If the employees see me approaching the doors holding an iced coffee with a glazed, disassociated look in my eye, they should be authorized to initiate a lockdown.
It is a universal human vulnerability simply operating on a different scale. Whether the dopamine trigger is a $1 plastic doll, a $70 contour palette, or an overpriced piece of vintage podcast merchandise, the neurological loop is identical. The brain demands a reward to soothe the anxiety. Madison's father exposing this at the dinner table was undeniably hilarious, but it also highlighted the intense, practical realities of supporting a neurodivergent partner.
And the beautiful part is that Tyler isn't fazed by it. He accepts her, compulsions and all. And she has clearly developed better budgeting skills because they are officially taking their first shared vacation. A flight to Nashville, Tennessee.
The logistics of travel invariably expose the deepest, most inflexible traits of a person's character. You observe Tyler, who operates as a walking, talking, highly specialized database of NASCAR history. He possesses an encyclopedic retention of dates, driver statistics, and mechanical specifications. And then you observe Madison, who operates on a completely different logistical wavelength.
She fully admits she refuses to pack light. They're going for a short trip, and she is packing massive, heavy, structurally uncompromising cowgirl boots. And, crucially, she packs a selection of her dolls. Because when you are leaving your safe environment, you require tangible, physical anchors to maintain your emotional equilibrium.
Which makes perfect sense.
So they arrive in Nashville and immediately head to the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum.
Which is an inherently unsettling environment designed to blur the line between reality and artifice. And this is where Tyler demonstrates an incredibly sharp, subtle wit.
They are standing in front of these eerily accurate wax figures of Whitney Houston as Darius Rucker. And Tyler, seizing the opportunity to gently interrogate her hyperfixation, turns to Madison and asks a lethal question. He says, "Are these mannequins more realistic than your dolls?"
It was a calculated, precise poke at her reality. He is asking her to critically evaluate the aesthetic quality of her chosen obsession against a professional standard.
And Madison's reaction is perfection. She physically recoils. She does this incredible scrunch face. You can literally see her internal monologue fighting against the truth. But her radical honesty wins out. She just begrudgingly mutters, "Yeah, they are."
It was such a micro moment of intimate banter.
But it is immediately followed by what I consider the absolute defining quote of the entire season.
Ah, yes, the invocation of Mr. V.
They are walking down the street, and Tyler, perhaps feeling the rebellious energy of Nashville, casually floats the idea of acquiring a motorcycle. He is testing the waters of a new, potentially dangerous identity. And Madison, without breaking her stride, looks at him deadpan and delivers a fatal blow to his hypothetical midlife crisis. She says that would be crazy. Only my fifth-grade teacher, Mr. V, could pull it off.
The sheer devastating specificity of that boundary enforcement. She does not engage in a logical debate about the safety statistics of motorcycles. She simply establishes an impossibly esoteric benchmark for coolness. She compares him to a phantom figure from her elementary school past and finds him lacking.
I screamed at my television. I demand immediate investigative journalism into the identity and whereabouts of Mr. V. Who is this man?
We need to find him.
Was he teaching fractions while wearing a distressed leather jacket? Did he arrive at the morning drop-off zone revving a Harley-Davidson? How did a fifth-grade educator permanently imprint himself on Madison's psyche as the apex predator of motorcycle culture, to the point where, a decade later, he is the sole metric by which she judges vehicular masculinity?
Oh.
Tyler was instantly neutralized.
It is a brilliant conversational tactic. She completely dismantled the fantasy by introducing an unbeatable rival. But speaking of individuals who are entirely consumed by their hyperfixations, we must transition our analysis to James.
Oh, James.
James, who processes the world at a blistering, unyielding verbal pace.
He possesses such a sweet, well-intentioned core, but his execution is completely exhausting. He and Shelley attempt to have a romantic dinner date, and the entire event is nearly derailed by his inability to emotionally regulate in the face of minor inconveniences.
The primary catalyst for his dysregulation being the economics of root vegetables, specifically the $17 potatoes.
Okay, on this highly specific point, James is me, and I am James. He orders a side of fancy potatoes. They arrive at the table. He tastes them. He determines they are subpar, and he physically cannot let go of the financial injustice.
He was spiraling.
I would be delivering a monologue to the waiter, the manager, and the table next to me as well. In this macroeconomic climate, charging $17 for a tuber that tastes like unseasoned dirt. It is an outrage.
He was visibly and vocally distressed by the negative return on investment. His internal sense of fairness was violated, but the potatoes were merely the opening act. The true antagonist of the evening arrives in the form of a single, solitary winged insect.
A fly lands on the table, not a swarm of locusts. One average housefly. And James completely halts all romantic discourse to loudly declare that this insect is a spreader of filth and pestilence.
The linguistic choices are what elevate the moment. He doesn't resort to modern slang. He bypasses gross and goes straight to evoking biblical plagues, pestilence. It reveals a mind that catastrophizes minor environmental flaws through a highly academic vocabulary.
But beneath the frantic, anxious energy and the potato-induced rage, James actually articulates an incredibly profound, progressive ideological framework. This is where I find him so conflicting.
Yes, the intersection of his ideological theory and his conversational practice is the core tension. He begins discussing the concept of marriage, and he launches into an unprompted, passionate deconstruction of patriarchal traditions.
Which we love.
He explicitly states his hatred for misogyny. He rejects the archaic notion of a bride being given away as a transfer of property. He actively detests the phrase, old ball and chain. He clearly outlines his desire for an egalitarian partnership based on mutual respect and genuine liking.
He is articulating the exact foundational principles of a feminist king. He has done the reading, and furthermore, he transitions seamlessly into environmentalism, passionately lecturing about the superior energy efficiency and lifespan of LED lighting.
He covers a lot of ground.
I am sitting on my couch thinking, look at the theoretical perfection of this man. He advocates for women's autonomy. He cares deeply about reducing carbon emissions. He commands an extensive vocabulary. He simply lacks the practical execution of these ideals.
Precisely. Because you can hold a degree in feminist theory, but if you do not leave a 5-second conversational pause for your female partner to actually contribute a thought, you are still actively dominating the space. The theory is sound, the application is critically flawed, and this brings us to the recipient of this verbal barrage, Shelley.
Shelley is operating with the patience of a monastic saint. She barely utters a complete sentence throughout the entire date. She simply sits across from him, offering polite nods, occasionally inserting a soft "that's interesting," while James delivers an unbroken high-speed TED Talk on the historical origins of the patriarchy and the thermal output of light bulbs.
It was a lot to process.
I was physically tense watching it, actively screaming at my screen, "Someone hand Shelley a microphone! Let the woman speak!"
It is a deeply unbalanced conversational ecosystem. However, if we incorporate our external Reddit sleuthing into the analysis, the context shifts significantly. Shelley recently conducted a Q&A session on her Instagram, providing crucial behind-the-scenes insight into their dynamic.
I missed this. What was her assessment?
A viewer directly asked her if James's relentless verbal pacing is consistent off-camera, and Shelley clarified that it is not. She explained that without the presence of the production crew, James is significantly more mellow, his pacing slows down, and he is actually a very attentive listener.
That makes complete psychological sense. We are witnessing the devastating impact of performative anxiety amplified by a highly unnatural environment. Imagine being prone to over-explaining as a self-soothing mechanism, and suddenly you have glaring lights, boom mics hovering inches from your face, and producers intensely observing your every micro-expression.
It would break anyone.
The silence feels like a threat. So he verbally vomits to fill the void, attempting to prove his intellectual worth, because he is terrified of being perceived as boring.
It is exactly that. The artificial pressure cooker of reality television actively exacerbates his natural neurological tendencies. But even acknowledging that context, his inability to read the room eventually forces a confrontation. Later, at the chapel, he begins rapidly escalating the commitment timeline, rambling about buying a white suit and getting married, and Shelley finally, gently, hits the brakes.
Thank God.
She admits she is feeling overwhelmed. He has to learn to observe her physical cues, not just his internal monologue.
He does. The intention is pure, but the calibration needs serious work. Now, transitioning from a man who processes his anxiety through high-speed verbal output, we must examine a woman who proves that silence is a highly lethal, highly effective weapon. Let's look at Connor and Georgie.
They are celebrating a significant milestone, their one-year anniversary, and they choose to commemorate this event by attending a Renaissance Faire, fully clothed in Viking attire.
It is the pinnacle of niche, committed couple behavior. They look genuinely happy. But as they're walking through the grounds, Connor delivers what might be the most confidently incorrect historical assessment ever recorded on film.
Oh, no.
The camera executes a wide panning shot of the fair. We see people in fairy wings, individuals wearing anachronistic steampunk goggles, and a random attendee wearing a modern anime headband. A complete chaotic mishmash of fantasy cosplay. And Connor, surveying the scene with utmost sincerity, states, all of this is what England was really like.
It is a stunning display of historical inaccuracy, delivered without a trace of irony. But the defining moment of this anniversary date occurs at the carnival game, the tomato throwing booth.
This sequence belongs in a museum. It is flawless television. They approach a wooden stockade where a carnival barker has his head and hands locked in place. The entire premise of this man's employment is to aggressively taunt the patrons while they attempt to pelt him with produce.
Yes. There is a literal warning sign explicitly stating that easily offended individuals should not participate.
It is an environment engineered to provoke an emotional response. Connor steps up to the line, and the barker immediately begins dismantling his confidence. He assesses Connor's throwing motion and yells, "Hey, Connor, nobody told you this, but you're left-handed." It is a highly specific, strange insult that immediately rattles Connor's concentration. He completely loses his form.
He chokes. He misses every single shot. The tomatoes are flying wide. The barker is loudly mocking his lack of athletic prowess, and Connor is visibly shrinking. And then Georgie steps up to the counter. Georgie, who throughout our observation has been defined by her soft-spoken nature, her gentleness, and her passivity, she accepts the basket of tomatoes. And we witness a profound behavioral transformation.
She doesn't just toss the tomatoes, she unleashes absolute hell. She violently, aggressively nails the barker with pinpoint accuracy, a direct hit to the face, a direct hit to the chest. She systematically destroys him.
It was glorious.
And the most terrifying part, she executes this barrage of produce without breaking a sweat, without allowing a smile to cross her face, and without uttering a single syllable of retaliatory trash talk. She enforces a physical boundary with total, chilling silence.
From an evolutionary psychology perspective, it is a fascinating display of mate defense. She perceives a threat to her partner's social standing and she neutralizes it, but she does it utilizing kinetic boundary enforcement rather than verbal posturing.
She is a sniper.
True confidence is silent. She doesn't need to yell or posture to prove dominance. The velocity and accuracy of the tomato communicate everything necessary. She avenged his honor and simply handed the empty basket back to the attendant.
It was incredibly attractive. Do not cross Georgie because she will end you without raising her heart rate. And the psychological impact on Connor was immediate. He was deeply activated by that display of silent competence because immediately after, they sit down. and the romantic vulnerability just pours out of him.
He initiates a massive relational escalation. He formally asks her to accompany him on an international trip to the United Kingdom to meet his grandfather. Crossing international borders with a partner is a severe stress test for any relationship, and she agrees.
The exchange of gifts that follows is so tender. He presents her with a delicate necklace bearing the name Gigi, acknowledging her identity. She gives him a bracelet. And then the physical affection. They engage in this deeply passionate kissing. You can visibly see the secure attachment they have built over the past year.
It is a testament to their compatibility. However, as an observer of reality television editing, I must highlight the brilliant, absurd juxtaposition happening in the background of Connor's domestic life.
Oh my God, you are talking about the dog.
I am. The editors intercut this profound narrative of blossoming love with an extended, agonizingly long, high-definition shot of Connor's family dog aggressively dragging its hindquarters across the living room carpet.
It was so distracting.
And this is happening precisely while Connor's father is attempting to deliver serious, foundational life advice regarding commitment.
The editors of this specific program deserve the highest accolades available in the industry. Why is there a recurring motif of canine anal distress on this show? It completely undercuts the gravity of the father's speech with pure, lowbrow physical comedy. It is a masterclass in tension breaking. And while we are analyzing Connor's home life, I have to make an observation, and I refuse to feel any shame about it.
Go for it.
Connor's mother is exceptionally beautiful.
Your assessment is entirely aligned with the broader cultural consensus. The online forums were essentially derailed by her brief appearance. Users were ignoring the emotional depth of the episode entirely to analyze her bone structure as she chased the scooting dog out the front door.
She is undeniably gorgeous. If she has a specific skincare regimen or a preferred dermatologist, she has a moral obligation to release that information to the public immediately. But moving from a couple celebrating a stable one-year anniversary, we must examine the absolute chaos agents of the season. The couple who is actively fast-tracking every known romantic milestone while completely subverting the traditional scripts of courtship, Logan and Hailey.
Logan operates on a completely divergent temporal and social plane. He processes relationships with a terrifying velocity, and his unintentional comedic timing is sharper than most professional comedians.
Let's begin with the debrief he holds with his family, following his very first date with Hailey. He walks through the door, and his internal paradigm has shifted. He announces that he is madly in love. And as a symbol of his newfound commitment to a physical reality, he officially terminates his relationship with his imaginary digital girlfriend, Tifa, from the Final Fantasy video game franchise.
Which, rest in peace, Tifa, your emotional labor is no longer required.
He explicitly requested that his family cease all references to Tifa, and we should honor that boundary. But the critical moment of this debrief is his attempt to articulate the depth of his devotion to Hailey. He is trying to explain that his affection is not contingent on her social or economic status. And the specific metric he uses to convey this unconditional love is even if she's a lunch lady.
His sister, possessing a typical neurotypical social filter, immediately bursts into laughter because it is such a bizarre, hyperspecific, hypothetical scenario. And Logan's reaction is what elevates the moment. He does not laugh. He does not crack a smile. He turns to his sister, locks eyes with her, and with a tone of absolute chilling authority says, "This isn't about you."
It was a ruthless, immediate shutdown of external judgment. He identified her laughter as a threat to the sincerity of his declaration, and he neutralized it. And if you examine the internal logic of his statement, it is profoundly respectful. He views cafeteria workers as essential, kind individuals who provide a vital service. To him, suggesting she could be a lunch lady is not a demotion of status. It is an affirmation that his love transcends superficial career metrics. The intent is pure, even if the phrasing is wildly unorthodox.
The execution is pure stand-up comedy. He is effortlessly iconic. And the beautiful thing is, Hailey matches his exact frequency. When they rendezvous for their second date, we witness a masterclass in radical transparency. Logan is attempting to compliment her appearance. He explains his preference for what he terms curvy straight hair and tells her he appreciates her current hairstyle. And Hailey, rejecting every societal expectation of feminine artifice, looks at him and drops the most iconic sentence ever uttered on a date.
I just got out of the shower a couple days ago. I screamed out loud. She entirely bypasses the performance of perfection. She's not pretending she spent 3 hours with a Dyson Airwrap. She explicitly acknowledges that she is operating on second or third day unwashed hair. and she demands he accept the reality of her hygiene cycle.
It is the absolute subversion of the romantic ideal. Traditional dating scripts require women to present a flawless, highly manicured version of themselves. Hailey dismantles that expectation immediately. It is a high-risk, high-reward strategy of trust building. She is establishing a baseline of truth. This is the unfiltered reality of existing with me. Proceed if you dare.
And he absolutely proceeds. They embark on their second date, and the location scouts deserve an award. They go to a literal ghost town. Because nothing facilitates romantic intimacy quite like the imminent threat of tetanus, structural collapse, and abandoned machinery.
The environment is inherently hostile. They enter a dilapidated general store, and the proprietor immediately warns them about the presence of venomous rattlesnakes on the property. And then he casually directs their attention to an old freezer, offering them ice cream. It is a textbook psychological setup.
It is a trap. They lift the lid of the freezer, and resting directly on top of the ice cream novelties is a highly realistic, coiled rubber snake. Hailey reacts with a standard, appropriate startle response. She screams and jumps back. But Logan's central nervous system processes the shock in a completely unprecedented manner. He physically recoils, clutches his chest, and screams at the top of his lungs, "Oh, Jonas Brothers!"
We are witnessing the birth of a new cultural idiom. When faced with the threat of a simulated reptile, he bypassed traditional profanity and invoked the name of a mid-2000s pop rock sibling trio. It is a fascinating linguistic reflex.
But his recovery is even better. The proprietor reveals it is a practical joke. And Logan, his heart rate probably sitting at 140 beats per minute, looks at the man, analyzes the mechanics of the prank, and calmly states that the joke was, quote, sick but valid.
Sick but valid. It is the ultimate expression of objective analytical distance. He acknowledges the psychological distress inflicted upon him. It was sick. But he respects the structural integrity and execution of the humor. It was valid.
I want that phrase engraved on my tombstone. He is a king. And they continue wandering through this apocalyptic wasteland, inspecting rusted vehicles. And Logan, attempting to deploy traditional romantic charm within this decaying environment, points to a heavily oxidized, broken-down truck chassis and tells Hailey she is more beautiful than the truck.
Which, as a comparative metric, places the bar essentially below sea level. But again, it is the sincerity of the intent that matters. He is utilizing the available environmental props to communicate his affection, and the sequence features editing that rivals Academy Award-winning cinema.
The match cut. They are inspecting a plastic skeleton slumped in a chair. Logan confidently misidentifies the skeleton as Michael Jackson. When questioned why, he delivers the driest, shadiest punchline after he died. And the editors brilliantly, seamlessly smash cut from the hollow eye sockets of the plastic skeleton directly to the hyper-realistic, dead-eyed wax figures at the Madame Tussauds Museum with Tyler and Madison. It was a visual masterpiece connecting two entirely separate narratives through the theme of artificial humanity.
The structural elegance of that transition was breathtaking. But returning to Logan and Hailey, the climax of their date occurs inside an abandoned, slightly ominous wooden chapel. Logan, displaying remarkable memory retention, has brought the specific cheesecake they failed to acquire during their first date.
Which demonstrates incredible active listening and follow-through. So they're sitting in the pews, eating out of a plastic container, and Logan accelerates the timeline. He directly asks the defining question. He says, "Will you be my girlfriend?" And Hailey, matching his directness, replies, "Yes. Will you be my boyfriend?"
So the verbal contract is established.
Right.
And then he requests permission to breach the physical barrier. He asks to kiss her.
She consents. And it is this raw, slightly uncoordinated, but deeply genuine first kiss. And the momentum just takes over. They pull back, and then they immediately lean in and kiss again. And then Hailey, fully leaning into the chemistry, says, "Okay, one more." And they kiss for a third time. I was literally cheering on my couch. The escalation from 0 physical contact to 3 consecutive kisses in a haunted chapel.
He accelerated from a stationary position to maximum emotional velocity in a matter of seconds. But the true genius of their dynamic is revealed in the post-date confessional interview.
Yes. The producer behind the camera asks Hailey for her qualitative assessment. They ask if Logan is a proficient kisser. And Hailey, cementing her status as the absolute queen of this franchise, stares dead into the lens and delivers the most empowering, hilarious critique. "He needs some work, but I can teach him."
I was momentarily stunned by the sheer power of that statement. It is a masterful display of quiet confidence and relational control. She does not artificially inflate his ego by lying about his technique. She issues a gentle, objective critique, but immediately follows it with a promise of future investment and instruction. She is establishing herself as the architect of their physical intimacy. She is firmly in the driver's seat, and Logan is incredibly fortunate to be along for the educational ride.
The absolute unapologetic energy of, I can teach him. I'm obsessed with them. Okay, we have thoroughly analyzed the data, so we must transition to our formalized segments. Segment 1, the cutest moment. What singular interaction generated the highest level of positive emotional resonance for us?
If we evaluate the narrative arc of the episodes, the moment with the highest emotional density was the preparatory sequence with Dylan and his mother. We deconstructed the socioeconomic factors earlier, but focusing purely on the emotional core. It encapsulates the fundamental thesis of the entire series.
It truly does. When she is meticulously adjusting his collar and the reality of the moment crushes her. When she transitions to speaking Spanish because the English language cannot contain the magnitude of her maternal desperation and love. The raw confession that her singular objective in life is for her son to circumvent the struggles they face and simply experience the mundane, beautiful reality of a normal young adult life.
It aggressively cuts through the cynical artifice we usually associate with reality television. It forces the viewer to confront the profound, often painful vulnerability of unconditional parental love. It is a reminder that behind every awkward social interaction on this show is a network of people desperately hoping for the subject's success and happiness.
I was openly weeping. It was a visceral reaction. Okay, moving to segment 2, most relatable. Which highly specific scenario had us pointing aggressively at the screen, shouting, "That is an exact mirror of my own psychological flaws"?
Without a singular doubt, it is the implementation of the dollar store ban. Madison's father physically distributing a photograph of his daughter to retail cashiers to legally sever her access to cheap plastic dolls.
I feel seen and I feel attacked.
Because if you strip away the specific variable of the dolls, the underlying behavioral mechanics are a universal human experience. Everyone navigating the complexities of modern existence has a dollar store equivalent. It is the localized dopamine loop. When your internal environment feels chaotic or unmanageable, you attempt to assert control over your external environment through commerce. For Madison, the mechanism was toys. For others, it might be a mandatory $7 iced coffee every single morning to generate enough serotonin to check emails. For you, it is the relentless pursuit of rouge status at a high-end cosmetics retailer.
Let me establish a firm boundary. Do not utilize my loyalty program status as a weapon against me. But fundamentally, I agree with your assessment. The urge to acquire a little treat as a survival mechanism against existential dread is so real. Madison is simply operating without the social filter that tells the rest of us to hide her compulsive spending. We validate her struggle, even as we recognize the absolute necessity of her father confiscating her debit card.
It is the cognitive dissonance of recognizing a destructive pattern while simultaneously justifying the necessity of packing heavy cowgirl boots for a 2-day trip.
Right.
We're all walking contradictions.
Exactly. Okay, segment 3. Best match. Based on our extensive analysis, which coupling possesses the highest statistical probability of long-term success? Who are we rooting for hard right now?
I will defer to your emotional intuition first, as I know you have developed a strong parasocial attachment to one specific couple.
I am entirely, recklessly emotionally invested in Logan and Hailey. The initial data is overwhelmingly positive. Their interpersonal dynamic relies on a fascinating calibration of radical transparency and unfiltered humor. There's no pretense. Hailey openly admits her hair is unwashed. Logan bluntly tells his sister her opinion is irrelevant. But beneath the chaotic banter, there's a foundation of raw, unedited sweetness. The progression of their physical affection in the chapel felt incredibly authentic. I am manifesting a wedding for them.
I will counter your emotional investment with cautious, analytical optimism. Logan is operating at a dangerous velocity. Moving from zero romantic history to requesting exclusivity and hinting at marriage within a matter of days is a massive red flag in standard relational metrics. However, what overrides that concern is the concept of structural balance.
What do you mean? Explain the mechanics of their balance.
Logan is highly volatile. He lacks an internal filtration system, which results in statements that are equal parts charming and alarming. He is a balloon without a tether. Hailey is the tether. She possesses a grounded, sharply analytical mind. She's not intimidated by his erratic energy. When he exhibits a bizarre behavior, she explicitly names it, calling him weird, but immediately validates it by stating it is acceptable. She assumes control of the physical pacing by offering to teach him. She provides the structural boundaries his chaotic energy requires to function safely in a relationship.
That is a brilliant analogy. He generates the momentum, and she provides the steering mechanism. They are perfectly complementary. Which leads us to our final overarching analysis, segment 4. What did this episode fundamentally teach us? If we synthesize the data, what is the core takeaway regarding the mechanics of love?
If we weigh the sociological data against the emotional outcomes, the primary conclusion is that authentic connection actively rejects the heavily curated, aesthetically flawless scripts mandated by digital dating culture and social media.
Yes. It completely invalidates the illusion of the perfect algorithm. Love is not generated by possessing an optimal ring light or having a flawlessly witty Hinge profile, or ruthlessly dividing a coffee bill to the exact cent to prove financial dominance. It is built in the bizarre, unscripted moments. It is successfully executed by handing a woman a cheap pink hat on a dusty movie set. It is forged by comparing your partner favorably to a corroding piece of heavy machinery in an abandoned town. It is solidified by standing in absolute, terrifying silence and weaponizing a basket of tomatoes against a carnival employee to defend your partner's honor.
It is inherently messy. It requires enduring profound, agonizing awkwardness. It involves navigating $17 potatoes that violate your sense of fiscal responsibility and surviving environmental catastrophes that blast dirt into your retinas. The awkwardness is not a failure of the date, the awkwardness is the authenticity. When you strip away the performative masking, all that remains are two vulnerable organisms attempting to establish a secure attachment in a highly chaotic world.
That is the absolute truth. And watching it unfold just provides this massive influx of hope. It disrupts the cynical narrative. It proves that love isn't a strategic war you win by optimizing your text response time. It is simply the act of presenting your unfiltered, bizarre self to another human being and having them look at your flaws and say, I acknowledge your weirdness and I choose to stay.
To quote the philosopher Logan, sick but valid.
Sick but valid. That is the new definitive thesis on human connection. Wow. What a massive, illuminating conversation today. Let's wrap this up, babes.
We have successfully metabolized the wine. We have analyzed the architecture of your histamine responses and survived the allergy spirals. We have deconstructed the toxic loop of your dating app burnout. And we have thoroughly documented the wholesome, radical honesty of television's most important social experiment.
So now we turn the inquiry over to you. Yes, you listening right now. We require your data points. Are you currently enduring the psychological warfare of the dating apps? Or have you successfully liberated yourself from the matrix?
On a practical, physiological level, do seasonal allergies dictate your daily executive function? Please submit your survival tactics in the comments because an individual in this room is in desperate need of a medical intervention.
And babes, the most critical question we can ask, based on everything we dissected today, do you believe authentic love is actually attainable out there? Or are we simply destined to analyze it from the safety of our living rooms?
I will leave you with a final sociological hypothesis to ponder. Reality television is historically engineered to act as a mirror, reflecting humanity's most toxic, narcissistic, and manipulative traits back at us. So, what does it reveal about our current cultural psychology? That our absolute, undisputed favorite program right now is the singular show where individuals are operating with complete, unconditional, and unapologetic kindness toward one another. It suggests a deep, collective starvation for authenticity. Perhaps there is hope for our messy, unpredictable species after all. Keep that hypothesis in mind the next time you feel the urge to open a dating app.
Wow, a devastatingly accurate final thought. Babes, you possess the instructions. Rate, review, subscribe.
Forward us your data. We want the case studies of your disastrous dates, your municipal retail bans, and any confirmed sightings of the legendary Mr. V.
Send this analysis to that specific, hopelessly romantic friend in your life who requires a recalibration of their optimism today. We deeply appreciate your presence, we value your time, and we love you. Thank you to the entire Snark squad for participating in this inquiry with us.
Stay shady.
Stay iconic, and we'll see you on the Snark side.